Hello and welcome to the Rochford Files with your host Andrew Rochford. And today we've got a pretty loaded show for a while. And it's a special Friday Primetime edition. Early primetime for me out here in the Mountain Time Zone. Right in the heat of primetime if you're in the Central or Eastern Time Zone. So it's a pretty interesting day we got ahead. And I'm not going to waste much more time with small talk. I think it's just time to just get right into it and start with Hunter Biden. Mainstream media ignores lewd Hunter Biden N-word text to his lawyer. The news this week that first son Hunter Biden routinely used a racial slur in conversations with his white attorney as recently as early 2019 has been studiously ignored by the mainstream media. The messages between Biden and Chicago-based lawyer George Messiers were saved on Biden's abandoned laptop and were first reported by Daily Mail on Tuesday. So it's that same laptop issue that Republicans tried to make a big deal back during the election, and the thing about that part is that wasn't going to move the needle at all with them, just like how they tried to push the email thing in Benghazi. But the one difference in those issues is I feel like those were a bit more needle movers, and the Hunter Biden laptop thing just wasn't going to move the needle for them, even if it mattered outside their circle. How much money do I owe you? Biden asked Messiers in one exchange on December 13, 2018, before adding, because, N-word, you better not be charging me Hennessy rates. The following month, Biden used the slur twice more in a bizarre, wide-ranging conversation with Messiers, in which the first son also joked about the size of his genitalia and told Messiers, I only love you because you're black. The report was first picked up by the Post and outlets, including Fox News, the U.S. Sun, the Federalist, and the Washington Examiner. And now here's a photo. Where do you find unconditional love then, George? God loves unconditionally. Bo loves you unconditionally. Children are too young to understand means, and you will show them. There are deals of unconditional love that serve as a proxies. I don't have many, you God. OMG, N-word. Did you just a fictionalized character from the imagination of the collective frightened, and my dead brother's unconditional love is what I should rely on, and my kids aren't children, George. My parents' love was conditioned. My penis, as of late, has been unconditional. That's why we are searching for my penis. And we will always be searching. It's big penis, George. They always find it. And I only love you because you're black. It's so annoying when you interject with frivolity. True that, N-word, but I'm done with my rant. We will always be searching. To be serious for one more minute, my true and beautiful friend, the search is over when you finally realize that the unconditional love you give is the end of the search. So he said, and I only love you because you're black. Did he learn that from his father, former vice president, and now current president of the United States, Joe Biden? Because it seems like the whole habitual line stepping of overt and covert racism definitely runs in the family. It's when you start to feel bold enough to say stuff like, if you don't vote for me, then you ain't black, like he did in that Breakfast Club interview with Charlemagne the God. And hey, Kevin Kirby, what's up? I haven't had many chatters yet, so I'm pretty bad at acknowledging the chat, but back to the issue at hand, which is how Joe Biden has his habitual line stepping between overt and covert racism clearly runs in that family when you've got Hunter Biden speaking like this. Remember that he also is that Joe Biden also said that he doesn't want his kids growing up in a racial jungle. There's been plenty of moments, and there's so many insulting statements that Joe Biden has made. Hell, it's even been in these last few months alone where he has gone on to insinuate that black people aren't capable of basic levels of things, of being intelligent. And that's just flat out wrong, but let's get to this next set of messages. There is zero coverage or pickup of the story, Zip. They spent a shit ton of resources on it too for a year. Wow, thank you, Michael Clone. And oh, and you too. How much money do I owe you? Because N-word, you better not be charging me Hennessy rates. That made me snarf my coffee. I just made that phrase up, by the way. I should have Nadger lineage. He probably meant had. Clever son of a gun, it's wasted on you. Apparently you do. Hunter, that's what I'm saying, N-word. Why are you so tan? However, the New York Times, Washington Post, ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, and CNN have all ignored the messages, which were revealed days after Hunter's father, Joe, became the first president to formally commemorate the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. So, does that sound familiar to you? Remember when this Hunter Biden laptop scandal first came out? I think many of these same outlets try to ignore it in the same way that they're doing right now. And they're clearly sending the message that liberal racism can be acceptable when we've got such a big problem of trying to let it be known that white leftism, racism isn't acceptable on the left, let alone trying to fight with liberals on the issue. And this next part of the article really illustrates the point of the liberals' selective outrage. Try to imagine one of the Trump kids dropping the N-word. Donald Trump tweeted Tuesday after the story broke. The following day, the former first son predicted not only will he not get canceled, but Hunter will probably get a few new seven-figure board seats out of it. A reference to the younger Biden's tenure on the board of Ukrainian natural gas company Hiroshima Holdings. And to that point right there, that's where the outrage from the right first started on Hunter Biden. And that was a bit of a different situation. But this right here is definitely a great point, because the selective liberal outrage is definitely clear and obvious. They would not be ready to have that same energy for Hunter Biden, given how little attention it's gotten among the most devoted blue teamers. Just try to keep a straight face telling people it would not be a big deal if one of Trump's sons was on record using the N-word, agreed National Review senior writer Dan McLaughlin. Fox News coordinator and National Review Online contributor DeRoy Murdoch agreed, telling Fox News Primetime Wednesday night that if this were any Republican who did this, BLM would be on the streets, Antifa would probably be breaking windows. But it's the son of the President of the United States, it's Hunter Biden, it's a Democrat, so not just a pass, but a total, complete, utter silence from the left. Now, that statement's a bit over the top. You see here, the actual left is going in on this statement right here from Hunter Biden. And in fact, we're even going after the people on the left who have woefully inadequate response to it as well. And after I get through this article, I'm about to live react to one of those poor responses from a left media personality. And the fact that something that little would be the thing that would get people out on the streets, that's being dramatic. And I say this because when it comes to issues of racism, they're very complex. The right often has a simplistic view of it, where they only understand overt racism, and they often excuse covert racism. I think your average liberal has a better understanding of overt racism in comparison to your average person on the right. But the problem is they're very selective on when to have that outrage for covert racism. And this right here with Hunter Biden, it's overt racism, but since he's connected to the blue team, they're just going to look the other way and pretend it didn't happen. Other conservatives spotlighted what the mainstream media chose to cover instead of the story. Maybe the reason CNN didn't cover Hunter Biden using the N-word was because they were all at Jeffrey Toobin's welcome back party on Zoom. Cracked former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, who noted a day earlier, while Politico ignored the new text from Hunter Biden using the N-word, it did manage to write a great piece on the White House Chief of Staff's affection for the soft drink tap. Oh yeah, that's another example of liberals brushing aside a scandal. Remember Jeffrey Tubin decided that he couldn't wait until after his work Zoom meeting to masturbate? In addition to the text messages, the Mail reported that Hunter Biden kept a meme on his laptop that showed his father and former President Barack Obama embracing. The meme's text reads, "Obama, gonna miss you, man. Joe, can I say it? Just this once." Obama, sigh, go ahead. Joe, you my N-word, Barack. President Biden himself has had a long history of using racially charged language. Last year, he told Breakfast Club radio host Charlemagne the God that if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black. And that last point of the article sums it up well about the main point about why this should be getting more outrage, especially from Biden's own supporters. I think by and large, the black community will, even the ones who loyally vote Democrat cycle after cycle, they will have the outrage on this. But the issue is, it's the loyal white liberal voter who isn't going to have the right outrage on this issue. And the fact remains that, like father, like son, we know who Joe Biden is. When it came down to voting between Biden or Trump, choosing between which races you prefer, that was a non-option for me and many other people, even though the numbers aren't exactly going to reflect well on that due to record voter turnout and the fact that all the third parties performed so poorly in comparison to the 2016 election. But the fact remains is, it's hard to measure the true outrage of scandals like these. However, I've been informed that Kyle Kulinski had a woefully inadequate response to this Hunter Biden caught texting N-word scandal, so I'm going to listen and really see where he went wrong.
Trending on Twitter yesterday was Hunter Biden, and I believe also hashtag racist Biden was trending. And here's the reason why. This is some reporting from the Daily Mail. They say, exclusive, Hunter Biden addressed his white lawyer as N-word multiple times, used phrases like true dat N-word, and bantered, I only love you because you're black, in shocking texts unearthed days after Joe's emotional Tulsa speech decrying racism. Text messages obtained by DailyMail.com reveal Hunter Biden used the N-word multiple times in banter with his lawyer. The president's son, 51, flippantly addressed corporate attorney George Mazires, who is white, by the racial slur with phrases including true dat, N-word. In a December 2018 conversation, Hunter asks him, "How much money do I owe you? Because N-word, you better not be charging me Hennessy rates." In another chat a month later, Hunter cracked jokes about his penis and then told him, "I only love you because you're black." Now, the Daily Mail continues, by the way, and they say, Hunter also saved a meme on his computer, or maybe his phone, I don't know, with a photo of his father hugging Barack Obama with a caption describing a joke conversation. So here's the way that joke conversation goes. Obama says, "I'm going to miss you, man." Joe Biden says, "Can I say it just this once?" Obama says, "Sigh. Go ahead, Joe." And Joe Biden says, "You my N-word, Barack." Okay. So that's the gist of the story. One of Trump's idiot sons was running with this and tweeting about it and playing the fake outrage game. So there's a bunch of things I want to say. First and foremost, what happened to the right being against political correctness? What happened to the right being against political correctness? Now, if this was some right-winger joking around in text saying Nigga, would anybody on the right be like, "Oh, how dare you"? If it was Steven Crowder who was caught in this situation, would anybody on the right care? Or would they all defend it and say they're joke conversations, get over it?
Kyle, saying the N-word is not a matter of political correctness. It is a matter of respect to black people to not say it. Oh, forgot to turn my mic up, but first off, political correctness is not a matter of issue that should be related to the N-word, because it's a basic means of respect to the black community to not use the N-word at all, and it should not be tied in political correctness whatsoever.
We do edgy jokes. That's what we do. The only reason they're going after him is because politically he's nominally associated with the left or the Democrats because he's Joe Biden's son. That's it. So my point is, if you're against cancel culture, be against cancel culture. If you're against political correctness, be against political correctness. Don't be a fucking hypocrite because you can score some cheap partisan points. The other point is, I love how they keep bringing up in the article, this is days after Joe Biden gave a speech decrying racism in Tulsa. Last time I checked, Hunter Biden is not Joe Biden. He's his son, but who fucking cares? Are you responsible for what your son does? Are you responsible for what your dad does? If they do something, are you allowed to get tarred with it? And do you think that's reasonable when that happens?
Sorry, but you should be teaching your children to know better, and saying the N-word is something that you should just know better about, and that is one thing that should reflect poorly on the parents who raised them. I mean, once in a while you'll have a kid rebel against their parents and still do it anyway, but I think you may have a chance of being able to tell whether that would be the case. But clearly with Joe Biden, it's clearly a matter of not being raised correctly here.
It's just, they're reaching so hard. Reach. That just seems like absolute nonsense. Bring up Joe Biden's anti-racist speech and compare it with this. And then the other point is this. Listen, I'm in favor of transparency where it's merited. So if you have some private exchanges about some corrupt deal going down, like, by the way, with Hunter and Burisma. What did I say throughout that whole scandal? If you're on the left, don't fucking defend Hunter on this. Don't defend Joe Biden on this. They're corrupt. Taking money from a Ukrainian energy company. The whole point they were giving Hunter money, the whole reason for that is so they had access to Joe and could get favors from Joe. If you don't see that, you're a clown. That's obviously what it was. So if you release private exchanges talking about that, I'll defend the release all day long. We should have transparency. We should uncover corruption. But my position on it, when it's private conversations that have nothing to do with corruption or nothing to do with war crimes or things of that nature, is, the fuck are you doing? This is a wanton violation of their privacy. Two people having a joke around conversation as buddies. This has nothing to do with corruption. This has nothing to do with war crimes. This has nothing to do with any sort of government transparency and holding people accountable. So what the fuck? He has a right to privacy. They have a right to privacy. Nobody else should get in their fucking business. Again.
You see, this doesn't matter right now. Even if you feel like you're technically correct on this, the fact is it's exposing what many people on the left believe about Joe Biden, and that he's racist about as much, if not more, than Donald Trump. The difference is, with Donald Trump, he's much more honest about his racism. With Joe Biden, as I've said, he's the habitual line stepper between overt and covert racism, and he's not fully coming to grips on who he really is, or he's very deceiving on that front.
I believe in full transparency and openness, WikiLeaks style, Edward Snowden style. If you're exposing NSA spying, exposing war crimes, exposing corruption, release all the private correspondence, because we have a right to know that as American citizens. Do we have a right to know this as American citizens? A private conversation between Hunter and his lawyer? Fuck out of here. Of course we don't.
Bullshit. If we never known about private conversations, then Donald Sterling would be still the owner of the LA Clippers right now. Of course we have the right to know this shit, because it needs to be exposed. Racism is still a big problem in this country. Let me add that Hulk Hogan would still be unscathed if it wasn't for Deadspin releasing the private conversation of him using the N-word. And even after he tried to apologize backstage, there's people like the New Day, Titus O'Neil, who haven't fully accepted whatever apology that he made that day. So this stuff matters coming out.
And by the way, again, I'm consistent. I would say this if it was somebody on the right, or Hunter, who I guess is nominally on the left. Don't know who even really knows what his fucking politics are. Just because his dad is Joe Biden, I'm supposed to think he's like right in line with everything Joe Biden believes. That's ridiculous. And then, listen, my final point is the most controversial one, which is, who cares? So listen, admittedly,
Holy shit, man. I thought the previous point was more controversial. So I imagine you back to when Adam Silver had just barely been NBA commissioner. Were you gonna argue in favor of Donald Sterling? Argue in favor of Hulk Hogan? Because that's exactly what it fucking sounds like you're arguing right now.
I'm the last person in the world who's in a position to judge this. Because everybody knows, oh, I have a glorious, long, infamous track record with old tweets. So much so that they're probably the most popular old tweets of anybody's old tweets. And I made a decision on principle that, yes, that's part of me, that's part of who I am or who I was. Everybody deserves to see it. They deserve to see the funny things and the good things that I still defend. And they deserve to see the things that would make me cringe today that I don't agree with anymore. But I believe in transparency. I believe in that openness for myself. And I put those things out publicly. So I'm in no position to judge anybody when it comes to this stuff. But having said that, I'm still going to give my opinion. My opinion is this. Who cares? It's a private conversation.
All right, that's where the hypocrisy is showing here, Kyle. You know that even though I disagree with your idea of leaving the N-word tweets up for growth, because it shows that there really isn't much growth. And the best thing you should do, especially other people, is your best bet is to just delete your old tweets that the N-word, if you've said the N-word, and before anyone really notices. That's probably the best practice you should have.
And they're joking around. Now, would my opinion change if it was Nigger? Oh, you bet your ass it would. My opinion would be on the substance of it, not the right of whether or not it should have been released, but on the substance of it, I would say, I don't like that. I think that's unacceptable. I don't think anybody who's white, or maybe even anybody, period, should use Nigger, because that's like the definition of racism.
There's no difference, Kyle. It doesn't matter after what letter you put after those first 4 letters. Still not acceptable. Even if you decide to use one of the other 3 vowels besides A or E. Nope. And it literally doesn't make a difference.
But I think the context is entirely different if it's Nigga. I do. I'm sorry. Now, maybe in the year 2021, as a fucking 30-some-odd-year-old white kid, I'm not allowed to fucking say that. Okay, fair enough. But I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong. There's a big difference between Nigga and Nigger, and anybody who's being honest about it will say that. Now, you're allowed to have the opinion both are unacceptable, but one is more unacceptable. That's a fair opinion. That's a fair opinion. But you're definitely not allowed to say that they're the fucking same, because they're not the fucking same.
I think that, based on what I've seen today on Twitter, that all the black leftists would highly disagree with you. And I just saw you said re-educational camps are constitutional. Well, I think you're trying to get into the whole critical race theory thing. I think that's where you may be going with that comment. And I plan to save that some discussion on critical race theory for my guest Sabby Sabs on Monday, so that's what I'll say for now on that point.
Not even close. Using Nigga in a joke conversation with your buddy privately is nowhere near Nigger, which is by definition racist and is only used in racist contexts. So, listen, again, I know I'm the last person who's in a position to be able to judge this stuff, but I don't care about this thing. I don't care about what Hunter's saying privately to his lawyer or his buddy or his girlfriend or whoever. Listen, Hunter's got a million problems. He's an addict. He had sex with and was with his dead brother's ex-wife or whatever. The guy obviously has problems, but I'm not going to judge that shit because everybody's got issues. I'm not judging that shit. The shit I judge is the corruption. The shit I judge is the pay-to-play stuff. The shit I judge is being born with a silver spoon in your mouth, you know, born on third and thought you hit a triple. That's what I judge. That's what I judge, as any reasonable person should. But
yeah, people like Kyle are going to be the reason why more black people are going to be reluctant to move to the left, especially being as dismissive of racism as he is right here. I'm stating the facts that I hear from the black left community, and this makes sense coming from you, and it's clear how you have such a soft spot for Vouch when you have a response like this.
this, I'm not judging at all. Not even close. So, again, I don't know how spicy this take is. I don't know how nuclear it is. There's going to be a lot of you who agree with me, but maybe there's a lot of you who disagree with me vehemently. I don't know, but the whole thing is a little silly to me. The people who are anti-cancel culture and anti-political correctness all of a sudden are pro-cancel culture and pro-political correctness. And it's all because partisan hack culture war bullshit. And listen, in context, I don't even think this is that bad. And again, furthermore, this is a private conversation, and this is not something where the public has a right to know. You have a right to know about corruption and war crimes and things of that nature. You don't have a right to know about a joke conversation behind the scenes. I mean, come on, get the fuck out of here. So I know this is, but that's the point, guys. The main point is this is all they fucking have on the right. This is it. What did Hunter do today? Did he do meth? Let's talk about that for a week and a half. Nobody fucking cares. Nobody cares. And this is not a drag down on Joe, because Joe and Hunter are not the same person. There's a million reasons to go after Joe, and I do it. This is not one of them. So get the fuck over it. Get over yourselves. All you do is culture war shit because you don't have anything when it comes to the economy, because you don't have anything when it comes to
Racism is not like the culture war. And it shouldn't be lumped into the rest of those bullshit culture war issues. And this is very revealing of the lack of growth Kyle Kulinski has had. If his opinion was more in line with the better allies of the left, then he'd have a better argument for leaving those tweets up as a sign of growth. But this right here is why the growth that he apparently shown doesn't exist, isn't very meaningful.
foreign policy. You'd be talking about that if you had anything that was popular on that front. You don't. You don't. So all day long, it's Hunter, 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 Hunter. He's not even fucking elected. He sits around and jerks off all day. Why the fuck do I care about what Hunter's doing? Jesus Christ, I can't. All right, anyway, there you have it. Hunter N-word scandal. Scandal. You make your own mind up.
The reason why he doesn't care is because he's indifferent. So it makes a lot more sense why he likes Vouch. And you don't get that because people like Kyle, Crystal Ball, they agree with the strategies of force the votes. But they completely miss the fucking ocean when it comes to racism. And they're completely ignorant to the voices of the black left, like Fred Hampton leftist, which is the main and big growing group. And it's baffling to me, man. Not only do you have a soft spot for the sock dens who are mostly in disagreement with you strategy-wise, you're also got a soft spot for the one like Vaush who is racist as well and hasn't really had proper redemption from it either. And this video right here shows the lack of redemption arc overall that you, Kyle, have had from your statement by leaving your old tweets up for growth, to show growth. Because much isn't there. Next up, we've got the shit-slinging Cenk Uygur as him and Anna Kasparian have been launching attacks at Jimmy Dore and Aaron Mate again, since they're in trouble right now and they're reeling big time. And here's a tweet. I know Jimmy Dore is an unstable con man and that right-wingers love him as he helps them attack real progressives. No, the TYT progressive is now shitlib. But I want people to understand that a lot of his supporters are not left-wing at all, while they pretend to be left-wing in their comments. It's a scam. Says the man who took $20 million of dirty money to help your network. Jimmy Dore is flawed. But the one thing he hasn't done is publicly fail to meet a basic purity, and that would be to accept dirty money to support his channel. I mean, when everyone brought up the house scandal during the forced vote, it's like, he's a comedian. Why wouldn't he be able to afford that house? That he doesn't need that. He probably could have done it without the YouTube career. But at this point, all TYT has in order to get people back on board is to be shitlib smear merchants, because that's the only way they're going to gain viewers right now, is trying to appeal to the liberal audience. This is Jimmy Dore's response. If you're wondering why Cenk is throwing pathetic smears at me, it's because I exposed the Young Turks for attacking journalists who actually challenge establishment power, like they're doing now to voting journalist Aaron Mate now, and like they did to Julian Assange. Here's a video.
Well, obviously it's hard to tell who's telling the truth here, but lately I have to confess that WikiLeaks has not had an astounding record. The way that Assange seems to be backing Donald Trump over and over and over again, it makes me very seriously question Assange's efforts to actually be a journalist and not to be a partisan. And I get it. I get why he hates the Democrats. They're trying to put him in prison. Okay.
Right. But
at the same time,
so are Republicans. Let's be clear about that.
And now the Republicans are too, and they have been in the past. But it seems like Assange has picked a side. And look, it makes me question his reporting. And so that's the situation we're in now. So now is he just leaking things that he gets, and no matter what, in which case I would respect that? Or is he selectively leaking based on his political motives? Now that suspicion is out there and it's real and it's possible, well, now I'm concerned that it can't be trusted.
So that's the type of bullshit smearing that they like to engage in with a journalist leaking war crimes, and how this is a critical moment in the future of journalism if Democrats follow through. Well, both parties, in fact, follow through on making sure Julian Assange spends the rest of his life in jail. But real journalists, by and large, don't care because they're propagandists for the state. A real independent-minded journalist, we get how dangerous this issue of Julian Assange is for press freedom. I mean, I was on the verge of becoming a journalist at a time, but life kind of got in the way of that. I wasn't able to devote the extra time needed, and the fact that I feel like if I had gone the conventional journalism route, it would have taken me down the wrong path. And I wouldn't be bringing you the version of Andrew Rochford with the views that he has right now. I'd probably stuck still as a shitlib, and who would want that? Hell, I'm disappointed it took me as long as it did to see through this bullshit. Even if I could make myself feel a bit better about only 3+ years of higher political engagement to pull myself out. The facts, and while TYT will smear actual people who reveal war crimes and real journalists who work on the ground, and instead of amplifying the efforts of the true on-the-ground coverage of journalists, you just shit on it. And that takes me to another thing. I don't plan to play it, but there was a little Julian Assange New York event where Mate and Roger Waters were there at. Still, if you haven't seen that Roger Waters rant on TYT leaked, that was great. Cenk Uygur, TYT. There's a reason why the left doesn't watch it anymore. It's because they turned into garbage. But keep in mind, even as newer people join the left and are able to avoid altogether TYT on their journey further left, there's still far other challenges, obstacles to pass. Whether it's random white YouTube streamers like Vouch and Destiny and reformed Nazis parroting very similar Majority Report and TYT talking points. And then you've got people like Kyle Kalinske. My introduction to the left. But when they're sympathetic to those people, and that just makes it even more of a problem. Facts are, if you're joining the left, you're probably going to have to overcome an obstacle of a toxic personality along the way. And for people who have been on the left longer than a year plus, man, that obstacle right there is TYT. But if you're newer, then you're probably going to have to evolve past the Vouch and Destiny types. Next, we shift to Ilmar, who made a light statement on Israel. Even though this article recaps it, but I really disagree with the headline. There's nothing offensive about calling out Israel for their genocidal actions against the people of Palestine. So let that be clear. A dozen Jewish lawmakers called on Ilhan Omar to clarify her words, but the Minnesota representative slammed the group's tropes. This is not the first time Mrs. Omar's criticisms of Israel put her at odds with members of her own party. In 2019, she apologized for implying money was behind support for Israel. On Monday, Mrs. Omar tweeted, "We have seen unthinkable atrocities committed by the U.S., Hamas, Israel, Afghanistan, and the Taliban. We must have the same level of accountability and justice for all victims of crime against humanity," she wrote, including a video of her questioning Secretary of State Anthony Blinken during a committee hearing in the House of Representatives. The row only comes weeks after hostilities in the Middle East ended ceasefire and amid rising reports of anti-Semitic attacks against American Jews. Once again, religion is not a factor here in this one-sided violence between Israel and Palestine. And this statement right here that Omar said wasn't even that strong of a statement, if you want me to be honest. Not enough to get real praise from me, mainly because the statements don't get followed up well by action. And if there's one thing the squad has not done well, is challenge imperialism by action. You'll see a lot of their votes are yes in favor of it. Occasionally you'll see some votes here and there that are no's, but it's usually only one or two dissenting from the majority of not only just the squad, but progressives in Congress. But Mrs. Omar's mention of the militant Islamist groups Hamas and the Taliban in the same breath as the United States and Israel rankled some of her fellow Democrats. Equating the United States and Israel to Hamas and the Taliban is as offensive as it is misguided, wrote the group led by New York Democrat Jerry Nadler in a statement on Wednesday. Ignoring the differences between democracies governed by the rule of law and contemptible organizations that engage in terrorism at best discredits one's intended argument and at worst reflects deep state-seated prejudice. False equivalencies give cover to terrorist groups, they added. Yeah, so the members of our own party are hung up on the whole they don't like that. On Omar, he brought up Israel higher than some of those other countries that were listed. For colleagues who call me when they need my support to now put out a statement asking for clarification and not just call. The Islamophobic tropes in the statement are offensive. It constitutes harassment and silencing from signers of this letter is unbearable. And even with this tepid of a statement that Omar made yesterday, earlier this week, this is how top members from the House respond. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, Majority Whip James E. Clyburn, Assistant Speaker Catherine Clark, Caucus Chairman Hakeem Jeffries, and Caucus Vice Chair P. Aguilar issued this joint statement addressing the comments made by Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Legitimate criticisms of the policies of both the United States and Israel is protected by the values of free speech and democratic debate, and indeed, such criticism is essential to the strength and health of our democracies. But drawing false equivalencies between democracies like the United States and Israel and groups that engage in terrorism like Hamas and Taliban foments prejudice and undermines progress toward the future of peace and security for all. We welcome the clarification by Congresswoman Omar there is no moral equivalency between the United States and Israel and Hamas, the Taliban. Ah, you've got to be serious, right? We know that the United States and Israel are definitely doing terrorism just like those latter groups that they said engage in. And the truth is, those first two groups are definitely more powerful. I said yesterday that the Democratic Party is a burning clusterfuck. And it's because of their total totalitarian mentality when it comes to the issue of Israel and Palestine. They're ready to throw progressives under the bus when they dissent from the party messaging. And the fact, and are you really sure if you're a progressive and you're really frustrated with the direction that the Biden administration has taken, that you wouldn't want to unaffiliate from this? Because I think if these squad members, if you've proven you can win an election and a re-election, then you've got the ability to go independent and still continue to win elections because they built up their name now. And anyone who loses it over them leaving is dumb, because being fully integrated to the blue team is dumb as fuck, especially when you see the way the party has decided to respond. And earlier today, some Republican Congress people have came together with this statement to remove Ilhan Omar from her committee assignments. And I only plan to read the bullet points of the I'm not going to get deep into this, except the main root of the argument is based in anti-Semitism. And as you see, there's 8 Republican House member signatures on this. See, there's not much difference in the total totalitarianism of the duopoly at work. Your fellow Democrats, they may ask you if you want to walk back your statements. Then when it comes to Republicans, they pretty much want to cancel you from all your extra commitments. And this is why, even though in the grand scheme of things, progressives going independent wouldn't accomplish much because of our inability to know whether they would follow through on action. Because we've seen with Bernie Sanders, he's been a committed independent for his whole political life, but now he's for all intents and purposes a blue teamer that's tired of fighting. That's why a lot of the people have moved beyond Bernie Sanders. And we need people, and it'd be a start if we saw progressives start to unaffiliate themselves. They at minimum wouldn't have to answer to the Democratic Party at whole unless they allow themselves to. Next is a very clip for Emily Jasinski, and it's what's going to be most memorable of the short-lived era of Rising with Ryan and Emily. It's like the Braden Walker DVD, if you get that reference. Let's watch.
Or just you could throw a dart anywhere at the global map, and you can probably find, at some point throughout the 20th century, the U.S. intervening to undermine, some type of social democratic effort and backing the most vicious right-wing elements. And the irony of them calling this anti-Semitism when the U.S. very consciously and explicitly out of World War II allied itself with former Nazis, helped Nazis escape justice, was complicit in what was called the rat line, with getting Nazis out of Germany and into these death squads that were run by the United States and deployed in an anti-communist fashion against the Soviet Union and against leftist elements in South America.
But who ended the Holocaust? I mean, what country? The
Soviet Union, actually.
Okay, but
I mean, the Soviet Union did that.
No,
we walked in after the Russians had suffered 20+ million casualties and marched into Germany.
Sure, but without the United States' intervention, a heck of a lot more people would have died in that atrocity.
Yes, and I'm glad the Soviet Union and the United States allied to beat Nazi Germany, but the Nazi Germany, the Nazis themselves then allied with the United States to go after the Soviet Union and to go after communist and social democratic elements in South America. That's an actual part of the history.
Right, but again, there's lives being saved in that process, a lot of lives being saved in that process, and a lot of Americans putting their lives on the line and dying to save those lives.
Sure, but many fewer than Soviet lives died to take on the Nazis.
And conservatives complain that school is too liberal. That right there is example of just relying on basic education here. And that's going to be the top highlight of the Ryan Grimm and Emily Jashinsky era of Rising. And if they had more exchanges like this, maybe they would have been able to run another week. Although it's clear that the show is tanking due to the chemistry that Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty had developed over their near 2 years on that show. And even though Ryan Grimm lightly schooled Emily Jashinsky in that instance, the thing is, Ryan Grimm is such a dry presence on TV. He is definitely better as a reporter, and especially when he doesn't insert his opinions much as well, because we know that he is opposed to a lot of the strategies that the left wants to see in action. And I say that like a Ken Klippenstein, for example. He's a very good reporter, but he rarely ever puts his political opinions out there. Except for that one moment where he dismissed the idea of Julian Assange. But the point remains that the Hill is going to struggle big time to find that same type of dynamic that they had with Crystal and Soccer. And it's going to take, you're probably going to have to go with a couple of flamethrower types if you want people to come back. But the thing is, I don't think it's going to be left the same type of anti-establishment left or anti-establishment right presentation. I think they're just not going to care about that type of person as long as they get someone who can make things interesting. If there's evidence that from the Hill is they're going to look to get away from people who are posed as anti-establishment, as Crystal Sagar, even though the left didn't feel like Crystal was anti-establishment enough. And now Sagar, from what I've seen, is drifted more towards the center. Even though there are still some fascist opinions that he hasn't let go, that point remains. So that right there is a signature moment of Ryan and Emily on Rising, which is like the equivalent of a show ending in 2 episodes. So I don't got much in the way of sports for today's show. Usually I've got a more substantive type of thing to cover. I'm gonna turn on my air conditioner real quick. So I'm going to start off by saying that Lauren Boebert is just like a Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I normally wouldn't go into stories like this, like these, especially since I'm really anti-culture war. But this is one moment I'll make an exception for because I'm not the type of leftist who is going to build my whole content on responding to these far right wingers like Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene or your right wing personalities like Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro or PragerU. No, that's not what I'm really here to do. I'm here to advance left-wing agenda, and I'm not going to be reactive to the stories. I'm not going to be reactive to right-wingers. I'm just going to be proactive instead and build content which helps the left grow more. So let's get into this tweet from Lauren Boebert. Congratulations to the Joker for being the first Denver Nuggets player to win the MVP. Nice to see a gentleman receive this honor. Notice that coded language right there. Gentlemen. We know that the most devoted supporter, MAGA type supporters, they've canceled sports from their lives for the most part. But somehow they always know the moments to push their agenda forward. And we're doing in this situation, we know what she meant by gentleman. And we know if anyone else besides Nikola Jokic won the MVP, just anyone else realistically, she ain't saying a damn thing. She's only getting this point across because this is happening in the same state that she's a House representative in. But let's say if Jamal Murray had won the MVP, she would have not made the tweet whatsoever. And there was definitely no chance she was going to call Jamal Murray a gentleman if somehow she had decided to congratulate him if he were the one to win the MVP instead of Nikola Jokic. So I'm going to shift a bit to why I don't get that CNN, MSNBC, they're putting all of their resources to get Marjorie Taylor Greene to generate outrage, and they're really struggling to get ratings with the way that big tech media has censored Trump. The thing that's baffling to me is Laura Boebert is really similar to Marjorie Taylor Greene, yet they're not even putting a tenth of an effort to try to see if liberals would be more receptive to her being the instrument of outrage. And even though sports do become culture war issues at times, I don't view it as the same type of culture war issues that you get with like products, books, and TV to a degree, because you notice with me, I'm not overly fanatical about pop culture, but I can understand certain lefties who are, if that's their thing, and they feel like they have to respond in moments where they play to this. And since I'm a sports leftist, that's why I'm making a segment on this right now, because she's using coded language to make a point about how the overwhelming majority of NBA players aren't good gentlemen, when I haven't seen any evidence to prove that. In fact, quite the opposite. And it's moments like these where they like to push that right-wing agenda. And it's unfair to Nikola Jokic as well, because for one, he isn't even American, he's from Serbia. And I also think it's unfair to use people for a political agenda who are trying to remain apolitical. And until people insert themselves politically, especially when you're from a different country, then I don't think that you should be taking moments like these to make points like this. Alright, so police officers have started to go viral again. And this is a group of officers who are punching and kicking a suspected shoplifter inside of a Dick's Sporting Good. I don't plan to play the audio, but first thought is, how many of these fucking officers have watched a UFC fight with those hammer fists when the opponent's on the mat? And how they've probably longed for the opportunity to do that same thing. And it's sick. And I would like to reference to LP from Walking in the Snow, even though it's not the exact same. When that cage is filled up, next they're going to come for you. And what you notice here is this suspected shoplifter looks white. So that means police brutality isn't just for one group. They're always going to be prepared to use it whenever they deem fit. Even if you're not the top brunt of the violence. But for now, these officers are on leave. And it's sick that this is what you see. And how every situation ends up with several more people to keep a person down than necessary. You can't reform this shit. I will make that clear. If you think just getting rid of the few officers who do this is gonna fix the system, they got new cogs ready to come in and continue where they left off. But this next one should probably outrage the average person who doesn't understand why we want to do away with the police state. Alright, Awkward, the top police abolitionist on the left, he shared this one.
July 2020, Nicole Harper was driving home on the I-67 and is alleged to have been clocked for speeding by Senior Corporal Rodney Dunn, who claims that she fled. But in the video, we see an obvious decrease in speed as Harper pulls into the right lane and activates her turn signal. She claims it was to indicate she was going to exit the interstate, as the area had a reduced shoulder, regardless of Harper's actions and indications that she would stop. Corporal Dunn initiates a pit maneuver.
Got the number 3 lane shut down.
See the text up top? The driver, a pregnant woman? I repeat that. That driver was a pregnant woman. You know what could have happened? Causing that car to roll over a pregnant woman could have caused a miscarriage. And the intent was clear. She was looking for a safe place to pull over. If you've been on a highway, it could be a long ass time before you find a good spot to pull over, even when you're not in the middle of fucking nowhere. So if you watch this shit and don't get why we don't want the police to be abolished, that's a pregnant woman. That's not protecting and serving. That's being fucking reckless and completely inconsiderate. And that's not what policing that works for a community would be about. And you know why you constantly get these instances? It's because they work for the state. They don't work for the people. They endanger women's lives. Let me repeat that. They endanger women's lives. If there's one thing that was clear about this video, is this woman was trying to pull over in a well-lit place, because if you're a woman driving somewhere late at night, the last place you want to pull over at anywhere is in a dark place. And when you have the purpose of the police is to protect the ruling class and property, it is not to protect regular people. Police only prevent 2% of crime. And another way they endanger women is they often don't even, it's legal in like 34, 35 states for police to have consensual sex with any woman they choose. Then you get into the point of, if the police can't prevent crime, then the purpose of them would be to act as reconciliationists. And even when you view it from that point, they're really fucking garbage on that as well. If women try to report their sexual assault or rape, and police dismiss it altogether, saying it's not my problem, because that's what happens a lot. You'd be surprised at the amount of stories of interactions with the police where they refuse to help people with their problems. And with the lack of care and consideration, how could anyone reasonable want to maintain this current policing system, yet enhance it by giving it more money? You've got to be fucking crazy. And it goes well beyond the police brutality to black people. It's the way that they dangerously respond to people who aren't in normal capacities, like autistic or disabled. I'm afraid it's a major problem, and one of the ways to change the problem, the road to abolition starts with defunding the police. How could anyone see this and think, oh, I need more to what led up to it? Get out of here with that police apologia, because it's not necessary. Footage we have tells it all. And we're gonna see more next week. We'll see more and more instances come up in the future of why the police state needs to go. Last story for today. It's going to go into the wealth that this thing called capitalism, every time it crashes every few years, what does it do? It pushes wealth up to the billionaires. Takes away wealth from the poor, and gives you incomparable crumbs back in return. From March 18th, 2020 to March 18th, 2021, the world's billionaires added $4 trillion to their wealth, according to a new report from the Left-Wing Institute for Policy Studies. That's a 54% increase for the world's 2,365 billionaires, who now have $12.39 trillion. The wealthiest 20 billionaires alone have added $742 billion to their collective wealth during a pandemic, a 68% increase. A January Oxfam report, which tracked global billionaire gains through December 31st, 2020, found that the world's billionaires had added $3.9 trillion to their wealth during the pandemic, an increase that could pay for the entire world's vaccinations and prevent anyone from falling into poverty. That report found that recovery for people at the bottom could take up to a decade, with 200 to 500 million people falling into poverty in 2020. That's an astounding number right there. And I think that there's still people out here living the pandemic who are still extremely disconnected to the inequality that the pandemic has created. And even if you knew or in touch with the issues at hand, there's some people who could look at that number of 200 or 500 million people and really think that it was higher than expected. Now, according to the IRPS report, which analyzes data from Forbes, Bloomberg, and WealthX, those billionaire gains have grown. Renewed calls for a wealth tax. One of the Oxfam reports possible solutions for creating a better world was imposing a wealth tax. The IPS report found that American billionaires account for less than a third of that total wealth, but a wealth tax like the one proposed by Senator Elizabeth Warren, where households start with a net worth over $50 million would see a 2% tax and those with $3 billion would see a 3% tax, would still raise $120 billion per year according to the report. See, the thing is with the two politicians who have real concrete plans to tax the rich, like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, theirs is a compromise. They still allow billionaires to exist. And it's hard to see how anyone could still want billionaires to exist with the way they're hoarding all the wealth. And the defense of billionaires' existence doesn't make sense, because almost everyone will never have the shot to become a billionaire. And the response by letting billionaires dictate all of society, that ain't the one that's gonna help improve society either. From the end of 2018 to the end of 2020, the top 1% of Americans just added $4 trillion to their wealth, while the bottom 50% held just $2.49 trillion in their total household wealth by the end of 2020. However, a new wealth tax may still be a ways off, and the President Joe Biden's new infrastructure package is paired with an accompanying tax hike. But that increase would only target corporations, raising the corporate tax rate from 21 to 28%, and seek to enact a global minimum tax rate of 21%. That leaves wealth individuals alone for now, although Biden's administration says it wants to tax households making $400,000 a year or up. Although with this article, indications have given me that Joe Biden is all but backing off of everything that you see here. Even just choosing the middle of what Obama's corporate tax rate is, and the fact that it's really minuscule in comparison to what they could be doing, since they're not going after wealthy individuals. And it would be far more helpful to do that at a federal level as opposed to a couple states, even though you're not going to abandon two of the biggest markets in the world either. I'm open to other ideas, so as long as they do not impose any tax increase on people making less than $400,000, Biden said in his speech introducing the package. Yes, so that's that on that point. What I wanted you to understand is how much wealth has gone up to those billionaires, and how much the people are getting fucked over. Look, it doesn't matter whether you're left, liberal, right. If you're not part of the 1%, you're getting screwed over by them. And I would like to see the 99% start to get on the same page for the solution, because having the right to be a cog in this late capitalism system is not how we wage getting the wealth equality back in our favor. And this graph as well, shared by Who is Zhu. Meanwhile, in China, Chinese millennials twice as likely to own their own homes compared to the United States. So you'll see United Arab Emirates 26%, Australia 28%, UK 31%, Canada 34%. And that's a slightly surprising one. You'd think Canada would be at least slightly better. And I think, and people identify Canada with being a socialist country, when the truth is they're slightly more advanced social democracy, but neoliberalism is still a pretty big problem there, just like when Richard Medhurst has said that neoliberalism is also becoming a big problem in the UK. It's a growing problem there. France at 41%, Mexico 46%, and China at 70%. You see the thing with China, the one thing that makes it easier for them to get houses, they got a jobs guarantee there. And when you look at these countries, none of these other countries have a jobs guarantee. And even countries with significantly higher nationwide minimum wages, they're still having a similar problem to generational problem, and that's home ownership. You know where these people are stuck in tiny overpriced apartments, or they're having to live with more people than you would ideally like, and something that's a bit of a bigger place to rent as well. Or you've got people being forced to move outside of cities and commute really long distances to work. And it's unfortunate because many of these states here aren't doing anything to control rent increases. And they also aren't controlling the rise of pricing in the housing market either. And that's why you're seeing so many other people in a position where they can't have a home like their parents or their much older siblings. And because there's several things that have caused this. We haven't been able to keep up with inflation from the standpoint of people's wages. Also, we haven't put safeguards in place to protect the rising of housing and renting prices. There's a major boom and bust to housing. And when you go to California, I think I've seen the local ballot measure on multiple elections to vote in favor of capping rent increases, but it somehow doesn't, it fails. And we know why. There is a counter propaganda going on to make sure that we don't improve this society and change course from this hellscape of capitalism. And it's really simple. And we know that and it's not going to be the same battle everywhere you go. We've got the challenge in the deep blue states of California and New York, where there's a bunch of wealthy people who turn into major conservatives when it comes time to vote in favor of people. But no, they stick with their moneyed interest. And problem's not going to go away. We're just barely reaching the surface level of all these people getting evicted from their homes. And you're probably going to see that take effect sometime in September or October, especially since there won't be another stimulus package. And all indications that the Biden administration has given is that there won't be either. So take that to the bank, and jobs are starting, most of the jobs are on the comeback. So that's another reason why you won't get an adequate response to this pandemic-induced recession, and one that will be prolonged due to not meeting the basic needs of shelter, food, water, light, and safety. Even though I just probably messed up the Maslow's need of hierarchy. But the point remains that we're just barely getting to seeing the major issue. And whether it's the latter half of this Biden term or the early part of 2024, they're going to be faced with the challenge on their hands, and it's probably going to get another woefully inadequate response. So that will do it for this week's edition of the Rochford Files. And This was the first show that I did. Third show I've done on Twitch, the first one on Streamlabs. But overall, I think it went pretty good. So soon I'll have this show uploaded to YouTube. So please go subscribe to the Rochford Files on YouTube. So here's the page right here. Some of the recent videos. So after the stream ends, I'll work on uploading it here. So please click subscribe. And if you're watching on Twitch right now, please click the follow button. And also go to the Rochford Files Patreon page in order to give a further level of support of my content. Go to Facebook Live, the Rochford Files on Facebook as well, and like the page there, and it'll share the live show times and YouTube videos. Also go follow my Twitter at NugLifeComrade and UGGLIFE Comrade. In addition to that, click follow on the Rochford Files Twitter page as well, a Rochford Files. And I'll be back here on Monday. I'll probably start that stream off at about 4 p.m. Eastern. And hopefully this time it will work out, as my guest will be Savvy Sabs of the Fred Hampton Leftists. I really look forward to speaking to her on Monday, especially on some of the recent issues that the black leftist community has had. I really would like to engage beyond some of the surface level stuff, so I can't wait for that. Have a good weekend. See y'all on Monday. This is Andrew Rochford of the Rochford Files, signing out. Goodbye and good night.